Hello students, and welcome to Flipped Classroom number 2. Today we're going to be talking about 3 new adjective pronouns, which are whose, when, and where. Okay, so to review, let's think about questions. We already know how to use these 3 words in a question. So when we ask a question using whose, for example, whose pencil is that? We're talking about possession, right? Is it my pencil? Is it your pencil? Is it his pencil? Okay. So whose is a word that describes possession. Okay, that's what we should remember. When, of course, if we ask, when are you going to the mountains or when are you going on vacation, we are, of course, talking about time, right? And finally, where? Where are you going tonight? Where are you going on vacation? We are, of course, talking about a place, okay? So to remember these 3 adjective pronouns, just remember how you would ask a question, right? Whose talks about possession, when about a time, and where about a place, okay? So who and whose are described in our Azar book 13-4. So you can look for more information there if you need to. Let's take a look at 2 sentences and think about when we would use who and when we would use whose, remembering that whose talks about possession. Okay. Number 1 says, I know a student, he met Steph Curry. Number 2 says, I know a student, her first language is Vietnamese. Okay, so take a minute, you can pause the video and think which sentence should use who, which sentence should use whose in their adjective clause. All right, so I'm going to give you the answer now. I know a student, okay? And here we have he, right? He is the subject, so we're going to use who, right? I know a student who met Steph Curry, okay? What is the adjective clause? Who met Steph Curry, right? We have who as the adjective pronoun, right? And who does who refer to? It's talking about the student, right? Number 2, I know a student. Now we have her first language is Vietnamese, right? Well, let's look at this word here, her. Her talks about possession. Her pencil, her pen, her first language, right? So for this one, we're actually going to use whose, right? I know a student whose first language is Vietnamese. Okay? And so this is the adjective clause, right? Whose is the adjective pronoun. Whose talks about the student's first language. Or we can also say her first language. Okay. So again, because this has possession and because her is possession, we're going to use whose, but we cannot use who here. Who first language is Vietnamese? No. Whose. Okay. So let's take a look at these 4 examples here. I'd like you to pause the video and to take a minute and try to make an adjective clause using the second sentence as the adjective clause and try to decide between 2 adjective pronouns, who or whose, remembering that whose is going to show possession. Okay. All right, so pause the video and go ahead and try A through D, and then I'll tell you the answers. Okay, so here are the answers. Wes J is a boy, right? Because we have here he and the boy are the same, then we're going to use who, not whose. He does not show possession. So Wes J is a boy who is in prison now. The adjective clause is here, and the pronoun we're using is who. Number 2, Wes J is a boy, so again we have a boy. His brother became a drug dealer at a young age. Here we have his, actually his brother, right? So this shows possession. Whose brother was it? It was West J's brother. It was his brother, we can say. So because his brother is possession, we're going to use, of course, the relative pronoun whose. West J is a boy whose brother became a drug dealer at a young age. Okay. So again, whose is our pronoun, and this whole thing is the adjective clause. Okay. Letter C, West W-O is the one, and because he does not show possession, we're going to say West W-O is the one who became a Rhodes Scholar. And our last one, Joy is the mother. We have her parents. Her, of course, shows possession. So whose parents helped her financially? Adjective clause, adjective pronoun. Okay. So again, deciding between who and whose, we're always going to look at that keyword possession. Okay. All right. So to practice, I'm going to erase this. To practice who and whose, this is your homework. In Azar, please do page 277, exercise number 17. Okay? That's one of 3 pieces of homework I'm going to give you in this video, so keep watching. Okay, number 2. We're also going to talk about the adjective pronoun when. Okay? We can look for more information in Azar 13-6 for when. Okay? But let's look at a couple of sentences here. I'll never forget the day. I met you on that day. Okay? Remember that when does not show possession. It talks about a time, right? So let's look for the time that is repeated in these 2 sentences. I'll never forget the day. Well, the day is a time. I met you on that day. Okay, on that day is also a time, right? To make the 2 sentences come together in adjective clause, we can say, I'll never forget the day when I met you. Okay? So something interesting happens here. We're adding when, and the beginning of this sentence we're going to keep, I met you, when I met you, right? On that day is actually crossed out. We delete on that day, okay? Why? Because when replaces on that day, okay? So let's look at the second one too, and we're going to see what do we erase. 1989 was the year. The year is the time. The Berlin Wall fell in that year, okay? So in that year is also the time. So how can we make an adjective clause? 1989 was the year. Our relative pronoun for a time is going to be when. Okay. And what happened in that year? Well, this happened, right? 1989 was the year when the Berlin Wall fell. Okay. Again, in that year, we're going to erase, okay? Because this is the same as our pronoun when, so we don't need to repeat, okay? So one really important thing is when we have when in the adjective clause, we're going to erase any preposition, for example, in or at, okay? So I'll say that one more time. When we have when as a pronoun in the adjective clause, we cannot use it together with the preposition. We cannot say in when, okay? We cannot say when the Berlin Wall fell in, because in what? In the year, right? So we have to keep when alone, okay? Now, other interesting relative pronouns that we can use instead of when can be seen here, okay? We can use when remember, without a preposition. If we want to use a preposition, we can use the preposition in or on plus which, right? So I can say 1989 was the year in which, right? Here we have the preposition in, and we can use with which to tell this is a time, sorry. Again, if I erase in, does this sentence make sense? 1989 was the year which the Berlin Wall fell. Well, no, because which talks about things, right? So we can't use which alone. But to talk about a time, we can use the preposition in which, okay? So we can use when, we can use in which or on which. We can also use that. 1989 was the year that the Berlin Wall fell, right? Again, that is a very versatile, very flexible pronoun. We can use it for people, we can use it for things, and now we can see we can use it for times as well. We can also omit the adjective pronoun here. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and take that out. 1989 was the year the Berlin Wall fell. Okay, so bonus points if you know why we can omit the pronoun here. Why don't we need the pronoun? Okay, well, because after the pronoun we have the Berlin Wall, which is the subject. It's the subject of the adjective clause, and fell, which is the verb. Okay, so if we have subject and verb, that means that the adjective pronoun is the object, and we can therefore erase it. Okay, so one important thing to note about when too is in this blue box. Okay, if we use adjective clause to describe a time, the adjective pronoun acts as the object of the clause, meaning the pronoun must be followed by subject and verb. Okay, so I'll just give you a quick example here. If we said 1989 was the year when fell, right? Does this sentence make sense here? 1989 was the year when fell. No, because when what fell? What happened? We're missing here the subject, right? So again, if we're talking about a time, we need to have a subject and a verb after the pronoun, okay? So the pronoun will always be the object, okay? All right, so to practice when, I'd like you to do this in our Azar book. Please do page 281, exercise 27. It's a very short exercise, okay? Okay, last one is where, okay? Where, as we know, when we're asking questions, where talks about a place, right? And we can get more information from Azar 13-5. Let's take a look at the example here. The city is beautiful. I grew up in that city. Okay. Here we can see that the city is a place, and also that city is the same place. So how do we make an adjective clause? We can say the city is beautiful. Okay. Now see what I did here. Because this city and that city are the words that are repeated, I know that my adjective clause must go here, right? It must go directly after the noun that it's describing, okay? So the city, now we need our adjective pronoun because it's a place. The city is a place. We're going to use where. The city where, okay? And now we're going to put the rest of that sentence, okay? Where I grew up. Okay. Now, knowing what you know from when, okay, do you think that we need to use in or do we omit it? The city where I grew up in is beautiful, or the city where I grew up? Okay. Well, if you said that when we use where, we do not use a preposition, no preposition, then you are absolutely correct, okay? When we use where and when we use when, we cannot use it with a preposition. In other words, that preposition and the place needs to be erased, okay? I'm going to put this down a little bit. Okay, so we can use the city where I grew up is beautiful. Okay. We also have some other choices for talking about a place. Okay. We can say the city in which I grew up is beautiful. Again, if we want to use that preposition, we can use it here. We can also say which. The city which I grew up. Notice we're going to put the preposition here after the end of the adjective clause. The city which I grew up in is beautiful. Okay. What's the difference between these two? This one is very informal. Okay. When I talk with my friends, I might say it. Okay. In which is very formal, very academic. If you're writing an essay, this is a good way to say it. If you want to impress somebody, this is a good way to say it. If you want to sound cool with your friends, this is not a good way to say it. This is a good way to say it. Okay. We can also say that I grew up in. The city that I grew up in is beautiful. Notice for this one, we cannot say in that. We can only say in which because it's very formal. Okay. Lastly, because here we have a subject and we have a verb, then we can also omit the adjective clause here. The city I grew up, the city I grew up in is beautiful. Okay. Here we need in because we're not sure what it is. Okay. So a little reminder, if we use an adjective clause to describe a place, the adjective pronoun acts as the object. It must be followed by a subject and a verb. Okay. So once again, we can see that here. We have the adjective pronoun as the object of this clause. We have the subject I, and grew up is the verb. Okay. So where and when have a lot of similarities in the way that they are constructed in a sentence. The difference is where talks about a place, and when, of course, talks about a time. Okay? So a little practice for where in your Azar books. I'd like you to do page 280, exercise number 24. Again, it's a very short exercise. And then to practice all pronouns, I have a worksheet that I'd like you to look at on the computer and write down your answers and bring them to class. Okay. It's called, what is it called? Adjective Pronoun Review. And I'm going to show you right now where to get it. Okay. We can look on Blackboard, go to Forms and Documents, go to Grammar, and it's called Adjective Pronoun Review. Okay, you probably saw it when you clicked on this flipped classroom. So again, please do the 3 practice exercises in Azar that I've shown you in this video, as well as this practice exercise, Adjective Pronoun Review. You can print out the worksheet and bring it to class, or if you don't have a printer or can't print it, you can just write down the answers and bring them to class. We will talk about them on Monday. Thanks for listening, guys, and see you on Monday. Have a great